All right. We are live. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to talk all about mental health. So the topic of today's webinar is Mental Health Matters, Meeting Candidates' Expectations with Wellbeing Initiatives. Before we get started, though, I want to alert you all to the questions tab on your bottom right corner on the screen. You can see a questions tab. Please leave all of your questions for our expert guests there. There is a chat tab. I would love for you to introduce yourself, tell us your name and where you're from right away so we know who's here. And then there is also a poll tab, which I'm going to enable in a second and ask a bunch of questions up front. But to give a quick introduction, and then I'm going to hand it over to our experts here. Today's topic is mental health and recruitment. Sort of off the back of Mental Health Awareness Month, we really wanted to center the conversation around mental health and do this from an employer's perspective. So how do companies meet candidates' expectations in the recruitment process already, and why there might be a mismatch, and how to get to, a lot closer to the expectations to be able to meet those. We invited a bunch of our panel experts, and all of them said yes. So we have a full panel of 3 really knowledgeable experts with unique perspectives on the topic, which, who will discuss the topic at hand in the next 45 minutes. So before I get into the introduction of the topic, thank you so much, Laura. I hope that everyone can hear me all right. Shouldn't be too clicky, I don't think. Well, I'm hoping that this is just a glitch at the moment, but please do alert me if this gets worse, and I'll try to fix it. Thank you for joining us today, Danielle, Eva, and Michiel. Eva, I would love to start with you. You are a career coach and a talent acquisition lead, so helping companies externally to recruit talent. First of all, why is this topic so important to you, mental health and well-being, and how does it connect to your job?
Yes, nice to be here and share my knowledge. So why it does matter to me. I hear a lot of stories from my clients as a career coach, and with those stories, I also see how important it is for people to feel well and to share their mental state of being with their team and with their manager. That's also one of my main drivers in life is to create more happy and healthy people in the workplace. And I think as a career coach and freelance talent acquisition lead, I integrate those aspects more and more. So with those stories, I think it's good to also take ownership as a talent acquisition lead to integrate it more and make it a topic in the agenda, and show that it is a high priority. Yes.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that introduction. Right on to Michiel. You are a Wellbeing Rainmaker. Can you explain a bit more about what that title entails for you and for companies?
Of course, I would love to. First of all, I would to take the opportunity to give you a big applause, a virtual applause for the Breaking Bias event, because for me, and I think, and I hope for a lot of us, breaking biases is absolutely related to feeling seen, heard, respected, appreciated, and all that in the workplace, and part of well-being and our mental health, right? So big applause for organizing it, for the great atmospherics, for the impactful lineup and all the discussions. It was really well organized around breaking biases. So thank you very much for that. Back to the question. Your question was a well-being rainmaker. Yeah, first of all, I always struggle a little bit with the word expert because when expert leaves my mouth, I always think, okay, now I'm already obsolete. Yeah, because expertise means a certain type of knowledge, and maybe it will end up in entitlement and complacency. So for me, it's more like, okay, how can we add value on a continuous way? So Wellbeing Rainmaker for me means that I'm highly dedicated to, let's say, improve and empower teams and individuals to prioritize their physical, mental, social, and financial well-being. So that's for me the meaning of Wellbeing Rainmaker. And the reason why, the seed is planted during 2 years of navigating as a director of operations for a creative digital agency during the pandemic. Started 4th of April 2020. Well, we all know in which state we were then. And it was only a summer holiday, and then we move on, and then we leave it behind, and it's business as usual. Well, it didn't. So there, I really became curious, how can we help and support our team in the best possible way, navigating through the big unknown times unknown situation, and take care of the well-being and mental health of our team. So that's the reason for me being here, and also it is related to my big, humble, audacious goal to help 1 million Indian young girls to improve their well-being before 2040. I know it's far away, so we will start with the orphanage where I was once given away. So my intrinsic motivation is to make well-being initiatives locally, globally, affordable, accessible, and available.
Wow, what an introduction. Wonderful to have you, and really excited to get into the discussion with you. Last but not least, Danielle. She is my lovely colleague at Equalture. As a people and culture manager with a really strong focus on D&I, how do you see the connection to mental well-being and mental health?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the invite, by the way. And what more can I say after the previous introduction? But I do think the topics are really related. So I've done work on D&I for the government before. And I think what strikes me most is you have to create a physical safe environment and or psychological safe environment. And I think that inclusion starts with seeing people. So seeing people for who they are, but that also means seeing them in their well-being as well. And everybody is different in that regards, which makes us super unique and which makes it fun to work with people. But I do think when you look at the role of a people and culture manager, you have the responsibility to take care of the people you work with. And when it comes to mental health, I think that is super important. And if you have mentally healthy employees, it also reflects on the way they work, the output they have. So I do think it's a super important topic, and we don't talk about it enough. So that's obviously why I'm here as well, to raise a voice on this topic.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that introduction as well. Very personal. I'm going to jump right in and make a poll available for you, which is, does your company have an implemented well-being and mental health strategy? And I would love for you to vote on this. I hope you can. If you go to the polls tab, you should be able to see it there, and then submit your vote. 2, 3 already voted. I'm very excited to see what comes out. It's very par on par, I would say. At the moment, 50-50. Interesting. Yeah, so quite a good split, I would say, from the first impressions, between some having an implemented well-being and mental health strategy and some don't. Thank you so much for voting on that one. I'm going to jump right into the next one and ask how many of your employees actively make use of your well-being initiatives. I'm going to publish it now, and then would love to see what you have to say. So is it 25%? Is it 50? Is it somewhere in the vicinity of 75? Where are we at? Some people don't know. That is also a very valid answer. That's why we're here today. That's why we're having this webinar. All right. Many saying 25 to 50, and some even saying 75 to 100, and that's a wonderful result already. Thank you so much. I'm gonna swiftly move on and walk you through a bit of my preparation for this webinar, because I think it's super important to get started with a few sort of what's the temperature check around surveys. So I found 2 Deloitte reports and surveys where on the one hand, between 61 and 62% of professionals would consider leaving their job if their mental health needs were not met. This is a study from 2020. This was a 3-year study. But here we see, pre-COVID numbers. And then if we look to a much more recent study, which was published in May of 2023, so this is fresh off the press. This was a survey done by Deloitte as well, surveying millennial and Gen Z professionals. And they say 80% of Gen Z and millennials think mental health policies are super important, and especially when considering an employer. And then 56% of the people in question said that they see an employer's focus on mental health resulting in positive change. So that is quite a large number, but we can see that the expectations are quite high from candidates. What companies deliver to 56% results in positive change, but then what is with the rest? I'll share those links as well with all of you in our recap, so you can look a bit deeper into these studies, because I think these numbers are very interesting. Well, what I gained from this to sort of kick this conversation off is mental health support and wellbeing initiatives are more important than ever to candidates, especially when we're looking towards the younger generations. But as we've seen in these numbers already, there's a little bit, I wouldn't say, maybe you could say a misalignment. Michiel, I would love to start this off with you. Why do you think there is a misalignment between organizations and employees when we say we're meeting expectations for mental well-being initiatives from the candidates?
Yes, of course, I would love to jump in that one. If it's a misalignment, I don't know. It's what's in the word. But what we see, and what I hear also from having discussions with hiring managers, but also with the leaders of the company, leadership team, and also recruiters, but also based on the report that we will share with the audience from Deloitte, is that although there is some hope, that there is hope. That's the good thing. We start to recognize and also experience mental health support in the workplace. So that's the positive side. On the other hand, there is a lot of unknown still to uncover. So getting more aware of our unawareness is thinking the right thing to approach. And what I mean is there are a lot of initiatives, yet the usage is still relatively low. When you look into the numbers more detailed of the Deloitte report, you see, for instance, one is taking off paid vacation and the whole regulation around that. 70% is offered such a regulation, and only 40% make use of it. So there is still, there is still a lot of unawareness, or maybe we are a little bit afraid, or there isn't enough psychological safety. But maybe that's more for you, Eva, to deep dive into the psychological safety part. But I think, we're so the positive side, we are slowly moving towards more, seeing more and experiencing more mental health support workplace. On the other hand, we're still at the awareness stage, and we're now into the understanding stage, so the educational stage. And Gen Z and millennials are expecting much faster moving forward with all those initiatives. So that's for now my answer on this question.
Yeah, interesting. Do you agree, Eva? Is there?
Yes, yeah. There is misalignment, and I really hear what you say, Michiel. And what I see is that sometimes employees, but also organizations, they want to solve everything fast. But when you look at mental health and at well-being, it's not there's no fast track. There is not it's not that you can throw in one fit initiative and then it's solved.
No.
So it lays much deeper than that. And I sometimes think we live in a society where we think, okay, I feel sick, I have a lot of headaches, I go to the doctor, I get a pill, and it's solved. But it's not like that. So really making it high priority, but not only organizations make it high priority, but also employees make their mental health high priority. That's gonna change things. And yeah, so there is misalignment because I think organizations, but also employees, think that superficial initiatives are gonna solve their problems.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I also think it's much broader than that, right? It's not only the initiatives, but it is so ingrained in your culture and what you do in the workplace as well. Because if you see, for example, if you look at the Deloitte study, you see that a lot of people value the flexibility, whereas you see employers actually requesting people to get back to the office more often. And I think that is super interesting to see because it's something that is asked, but then the reaction is a little bit opposite. So I think what is super important here is to actually listen to people and to have that conversation. I think the conversation, coming back to what you said, Michiel, is super important to be learning and to understand what mental health is, because what it is for me might be different for you, Kat or Eva.
Yeah, agree. And to add something, it's also when it comes to candidate expectations, it is a massive challenge, right, to meet those expectations. And sometimes we try to approach it as if we are running a marathon in 60 seconds, right? And that's especially when it comes to well-being, mental health. It's not a topic, it's our being. It's fundamentally who we are, and learning to create an environment to proper take care of ourselves, and also enabling individuals within the company to proper take care of ourselves, right? So it's a learning curve. So we by far, in my opinion, humble opinion, we by far didn't reach any tipping point. We're at the beginning of being more aware. Thank you, COVID, for 2 years struggling with that. But on the other hand, we're really figuring out, how can we support in the best possible way? That's where we are, I think, at this moment. And we have to accept that it's okay.
Yeah, and I think curiosity really helps with that, like being curious. I'm also curious, like, hey, what does work for me? What doesn't work? And then had to ask also to your employees, and as a manager, you have a big stake in that, like to see, hey, what is working for me? What makes me happy? What doesn't make me happy? And it's a progress. So it's not, what you said, Michiel, it's not like, okay, we're going to do this and then we solved the problem. It's like every time you're taking small steps and creating a good, like an environment to make good and healthy decisions for your employees.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's more that we have to accept that it's in this stage more about why than really going to the pragmatic or drive and in the how to. This needs time. We need time to create a psychological safe environment to open up and to really have these kind of mental health conversations, right? May I give one example of this morning? I've received from a very good business friend of mine a WhatsApp, and he said, Michiel, buddy, really good luck and success, and we have such a strong relationship. I won't mention your name. He's also in the conversation, I guess. But the timing and that micro attention to what's important for me, I cried and I laughed. And I was walking. I'm a real routine guy, so I was walking my 34 minutes walk, and I cried and I smiled. And those kind of micro interventions, whatever, really adds value to you as a person. It makes you feel seen, heard, appreciated. Sometimes it can be so little, or a founder who wishes you, I'm now in the middle of negotiating for something new, who is wishing me well with an investor and mentor meeting, which I had. And just an hour before you receive a WhatsApp, it's not only the big things. It's rehumanizing also our recruitment process. So this is a recruitment example, for instance, the founder and then me being maybe a late co-founder. So
yeah,
micro.
I really like what you said about rehumanizing the process. I think that is super central to everything, right? We're all humans, we're all different, and those small things really matter. It contributes to the bigger picture, but I do think it's important to be realistic as well. If you look at what candidates expect and what we offer, as a company, be realistic in that as well. Don't pretend to be anything that you're not. It's also okay to admit that you have to learn still, and that we're taking those baby steps to get where we want to. And I think that vulnerability is also super important, but also super difficult.
Yeah, sure. And the last thing from my side is although volume hiring is a number game, we are not. So think back in the times that we didn't have all the tooling, and how can we embrace software which enables us in a much better way and much less biased way to enable the recruitment process and then enrich the recruitment process. And on the other side, don't lose eye on the human aspect during certain stages and steps. And it's not only for you as an employer and employer brand, but it's for us as a candidate. We're not a number. We're a human being. For you, it's a position to fulfill as an employer. And for the candidate, it's the new step up career possibility. It's a real massive step. So also take that in consideration.
I think what I heard from all of you now, so sorry to cut you off, Eva, I'm going to pass the word on to you in a second, is care, right? That's what we're expecting, what candidates are probably expecting, what as individuals we're expecting is care, that people care about us as individuals. I heard a lot about, different topics that we covered in the preparation as well, geared towards, where do we start, or where should we start adjusting that misalignment? We heard psychological safety, organizational culture, conversation. Eva, where do you think we should start, or what's to be prioritized in that conversation?
Yeah, I think it's a very easy answer, but it's also very difficult. So we should start talking to each other. I think that's the essence of building a healthy culture. And I really learned that as a career coach, that when hearing their stories and really diving deeper in what makes you happy at your work. So as an employer, you should start talk to your employees. And I think when you build really relationships and not like superficial, hey, how are you? But really like, hey, we sit together, we have one-on-ones, and I make it a point on the agenda, like how is your mental health? And that creates trust and that creates psychological safety. So my advice, where to start to talk and talk to your employees about what they enjoy, what works for their mental health, how you can support them. Talk to your candidates. And of course, you can send out a survey, but you can also just make it a topic on the agenda for the interview. How is your well-being? What do you expect from an employer? Really open up about the topic. And and I think last, talk as a manager. I think you set a good example in talking to your team about things you sometimes don't do well, or what works for you, what gives you energy. And also, really, I think on all levels, make it a topic on the agenda and set the right example. So I think that's where I would start adjusting the misalignment.
Yeah, just curious about that as well. Like, what do you think a good conversation is? Because sometimes, you touch upon different topics, and it's hard to start that conversation, right? So how do you start it?
So I'm managing a team right now. So for me, every week I have one-on-ones, and we discuss. I think 2/3 of the time it's about what we do for the job, and then 1/3 of the time I really make time, and we sit together, have a coffee, and most of the time we actually also go to a different place, because we have 2 chairs standing in a different way than on a table with our laptops. And I think it's being present in the moment, and asking, and just don't ask a question and just hearing the answer, but really ask through and take time for that.
Yeah. And may I jump into that one too a little bit? And it's also a bit aligned with the answer of Eva. So thank you. It's listening to understand, and what I mean with listening to understand is making time, creating time, but also during, of course, the hiring candidate, during the recruitment process, start asking questions before you go into the whole funnel. You can ask already 2 or 3 really questions to deep dive into what's needed at our workplace. Don't make promises you can't keep, but being interested, because if you are open as an organization and really looking into seriously taking this to the next level, it starts all with asking questions and also being vulnerable and being very open and honest where you're at this moment. So don't promise anything that you can't deliver at this moment. But on the other hand, being asked gives also a feeling that an expectation also, that this organization is really thinking about and really learning about and really asking me these kind of type of questions. I think that's very valuable for the candidate, but also valuable for you. So gather the data. And I've spoken to BNI of course I won't mention the name, of an power company, an electricity company, and she said, okay, the candidate expectations, they come very well organized and very well prepared. So the interview sometimes is flipping around. So they're asking about, what is your ESG strategy? What is your well-being strategy? How are you approaching all kind of topics which 10 years ago wasn't on the agenda of candidates? So it's more informed, especially Gen Z and millennials. It's more informed. It's more critical thinking. So also be prepared as a hiring manager and doing your funnel. And again, you can flip it around by asking thought-provoking questions to gather info. So I think that's an important thing. And also keep going. That's my thing is keep going. Care for well-being is here to stay. So it's not a marathon. I'm sorry, it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. And don't get discouraged by short-term criticism. Don't get discouraged. Keep going, and we are in a figuring out mode, and we're all in this together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I look at recruitment and misalignment, so I think this is more like opening up and like building that psychological safety you want to create that trust. Like if I look at recruitment, I always start with an employee value proposition, because I heard a nice concept like a few weeks ago about culture Botox. It's like looking really beautiful from outside, but from the inside, it's old. So I think a lot of companies, when you don't talk to your own employees, you're like creating something from the outside. Like people think, oh, that's cool workplace, and we have this initiative, and we do this, and we have every month we go out, and then they arrive at the company and they're like, oh, is this it? So to align what you are and express that in the right way and share real stories to people who start working for your company. And I think being real, then you shift from quantitative recruitment to like really qualitative recruitments, where people stay happy at your workplace.
Definitely. And I do think it's also like it's ingrained in the whole business, right? It's not only a conversation you have with your manager, it's a conversation managers have amongst each other, amongst leadership. So I do think that when you try to create that psychological safe space, it requires proactive communication, as Eva and Michiel already said, and being real, but that also means being vulnerable. And I think that there's still a stigma on mental health, right? So people don't really feel comfortable talking about it. Mainly, at least that's an assumption I made, is it used to be weak to talk about your mental health. It used to be perceived as something that made you like less reliable. But I do think it's so strong to talk about your mental health, what you struggle with as a manager or recruiter or whatever position you're in. And sharing that will also create a space where people feel that they can, do the same and share what they feel or need or think as well. So I do think it's important to actively communicate to the whole business as well. So I think if you look at what we have done, we've also organized several talks about mental health, which was super nice to see how people can be open and how they felt comfortable. And I think that is also something that you show by, letting people see that it is important, and it is super important to talk about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all of your perspectives. I think what I'm taking away mostly as well, understanding, really asking questions and listening. Also talking is really important, and having those one-on-one connections, and sort of letting it permeate out into all sides of the team, whether that's up, down, towards all the different sides. So it's really built into the business and not necessarily just one tick the box exercise. The last portion of this, I want to focus though a little bit on practical ways, Dan, and I'm going to hand over the word to you. If we're talking about organizations, and we've seen the split is quite 50-50 in our audience, who have an implemented strategy and who don't, how can TA, HR professionals gather information about the expectations of candidates and also the satisfaction of employees around wellbeing initiatives? What would you do?
There's a lot of things we can do, I think. And I think it's two different questions as well, right? Like getting information from your employees is something different than from candidates. But I think we've said it already. And I think it starts with listening. So have those conversations, but also send out surveys to see whether your initiatives are what they need. And also ask people, what do you need? Because if you make a strategy based on what you think is needed, one size doesn't fit all. So there's different needs, and I think we should listen to that as well. Don't make an educated guess, but actually get the data from your employees. So send out surveys. What we did as well is just like asking people, hey, I want to know what you need. Can we come up with a focus group to see what we think is important for mental health? And as Eva said as well already, is like have the conversations one-on-one as well. So like what I do is like check in with people every 3 months, like, hey, how are you doing? What are things that we're still missing? So that on the employee side. And I think when you talk about candidate expectations, you can ask candidates, obviously, but it's also like reading between the lines. What questions do they ask when you make them an offer? What questions do they ask about your strategy? And also talk to each other, because obviously we're not, like, you don't do this alone. We have a lot of professionals like Eva and Michiel who are very, very knowledgeable, and ask them for advice as well. There's nothing wrong in, picking each other's brains on that.
No, especially not in this stage. Yeah? We're in the discovering, figuring out, and we will for the rest of our lives, right? We are not the most simple creatures on the earth. We are complex. Life is complex. I love life, by the way, but life is complex and a lot of challenges. And on the serious side, also, when you read the report of Deloitte, you see a lot of concern when it comes to the economic worsening and the impact on the environment, all those kind of. We have to be aware of our unawareness, and also to proper address. I think it's not only listening, but also addressing certain topics that we are aware, and it's leading by example. Also, the leadership teams should lead by example. One example, during navigating through COVID 2 years, I was part of the leadership team, management team, and I was the only one who was doing the walk and talks. We have no time, because I was steering 50% of the total team. The other 50% divided to 3 founders based upon our discipline. And but we don't have time, and we're in this, and okay, but we say we care. We are a B Corp certified company, and where's our employee in this whole? So leading by, it's for sure the walk and talks, and lead by example. And we are also in leadership teams. We are there. We should lead each other and make each other example. We're all in this together. We're all well ambassadors, right?
Yeah, I actually agree with both of you. So Danielle, what you say is actually having qualitative and quantitative data. So and that's in the candidates' experience. So like in interviews, but also ask like in a questionnaire, because I think it's very valuable to also have data to back you up and to make it high priority. Otherwise, I think a lot of people in the people team, they're like, oh yeah, we have this feeling, and then management is like, okay, yeah, you have this feeling, but really make it more data driven, and then also for your employees, like have interviews where you can take deep dives, but also have a survey or questionnaire where you just have like gather data. So I think that, and to react on you, Michiel, we have a managing director for the company, the startup I work for now, and he has young kids, and he's going to pick up his kids 2 times a week. And I think it's so small, but it's so big. And when your managing director is doing that, really, like, you see how that shifts in the company, like the mindset of, hey, actually we have flexible work hours. But I've been to other companies where they had flexible work hours and everybody was in at 9 or at 8:30 and everybody was leaving at 6. And I was like, hey, what is flexible here? Yeah. And here, this company, like, because the leaders are doing it, it changes the whole thing. And to show that it is possible. Yeah. And that's I think also a practical way to do it.
Amazing. I think that data-driven piece is just gold at the moment. I think everyone talks about, well, we need to base it on data, and we need to leverage the data that we're getting. So that those are wonderful ways to do it. Asking, surveying candidates, surveying employees, having those one-on-one check-ins to get that qualitative data as well, which is just such a good piece to complete the puzzle. As I hear you say, and then also leading by example. I think that's also a very practical way what you as an individual can do. I have a question from the audience actually that fits quite well with that topic. Anna says that she used to work at a company where the manager was micromanaging them. It was an NGO specifically, and she says it is the worst since we should work together and communicate daily to increase the business. Do you think that an employee in that situation should be brave enough to step up and share that it is bad, that they're feeling being micromanaged? Because sometimes employees are not doing anything even though they are aware. Do you think they should step up?
Yeah, so it's really hard to answer this question. So I would say just have shout out to me on LinkedIn, because I need more context to have a good answer on this. And it really depends. But I think it is good to open up, because otherwise you always feel stuck when you cannot be your authentic self and can say what's on your mind. So I think it's good to do that, but it's to who do you do that, and what is a good way to do. But I would say yes. Speak up.
I agree, and then my question would be, okay, what if you don't?
Yeah.
What if you don't? It's something like quiet quitting, right? It's what if you don't? You will for sure. And hopefully you will choose for yourself if it's not going to change. But it's I think the step before it's my answer is to this question is that the asking this question for me gives the feeling that, okay, if there are so high barriers, how psychological safe are you feeling at this moment in this company? And I'm not judging, and of course, Eva is right, more context. And although on the other side, I don't know them, so I'm okay. But if you have the feeling you can't say anything about it, but it makes you feel really bad, it makes me feel bad. So I hope it's a little bit clear what I mean. But what I do mean is creating psychological safe environments. In the end, from my perspective, it's also a mutual responsibility. It's also educating top down, bottom up, left, right, whatever. Explain why and how and which impact it has. And if somebody is not listening and in a leadership role, then then make your plan. But I hope that we are moving towards a world where we can speak up and be open, reflect, listen to understand, and also be vulnerable enough as a leader to say, okay, let me think on that and let me come back on it. So I hope we will reach that tipping point that is the new normal.
That is a great. Those are both great answers. She's also said thank you. So thank you both for this assessment, however little information we have. One last question, because then we need to wrap up. Laura May asks, what incentives have you seen to help managers take ownership for the psychological safety in their teams?
Incentive in terms of incentive for who?
For the managers, to help them take ownership of the topic of psychological safety in their own teams.
Okay. I hope I understand the question, and therefore I'm going to answer it in the right way. But one example, we were navigating through COVID around about 12 months. And we were looking into, okay, but how can we make sure that we, as a leadership team and leads, are having proper conversations with their team differently, besides only project related? So how can we make sure that we have really proper conversations with everybody in lockdown situation, and to make sure that we actually have the feeling we know how everybody is doing. So what I decided to do as heading operations, one of my beginning and end responsible was people and culture, was starting, we had a mental aid fight corona Slack channel only for the leads and our office happiness manager. And we started communicating within that channel. We set up a Google Sheet with all the team members and the leads, and every week they had to give a number between 1 and 10. It's very subjective, but doing that is it was all about the behavioral change behind it, right? So you can't put in a number, and we weren't the company and aren't the company to fill in numbers, and didn't have the conversation. So it forced our team leads to have the conversation different than project related. That's the first one. And the second one, having it over time, you see certain trends, and we compare the trends with somebody, how's everybody doing, towards events and critical events happening at that moment, and if there's a correlation. So that's the behavioral change. Certainly leads to a first step in creating a more psychological safe environment. I hope it answers a little bit the question.
Yeah, and I think we've touched upon this already, but also use data. So when your data shows that people aren't feeling safe, leverage that as well. Like, hey, we see a drop in numbers. How is that possible? What are you doing? So that's a conversation I think you should definitely have as well when it comes to the managers, and just also reiterating how important it is to prioritize mental health and what people can do. But I do think it requires a lot of reflection, self-reflection from leaders and managers as well.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, what maybe a nice initiative we did last year here is that we hosted the Gallup Strengths Finder test, and we set per team, and also with the manager, and the manager was also having one-on-one discussions with their team members to really see, and that also already opens up a lot about, hey, where is your strength, where lies your strength, what makes you happy, how can I make a nice environment to promote that, and it really focuses on the things that you do well in, instead of, hey, this is going wrong, and that actually, I saw huge changes in the way of collaboration, and also the way they opened up to their manager.
Building trust, right? Building trust, a foundation of trust.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, we're already over time. One last thing, because I do not want to leave floor hanging. She's asking, do you have any tips on how to break a culture in an organization where it's frowned upon, or sort of talking about mental health challenges is very difficult because it's seen as a weak thing or a disadvantage if you have issues? How do you break that culture?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
And that takes me a little bit back to one of my previous assignments as in the leadership team of a big fashion company, and we had 4 core values, and I even know them really now, like 15 years later: play to win, willing to confront, celebrate successes and victory, and no future without ambition. Those 4. And I can't even imagine myself working there anymore. So that's not my piece of advice, to be honest, but more like, okay, what if I'm still working, or we're still working within that company? It was very muscular, so muscular that one of the founders actually said to an older COO when he was a little bit late. Can you imagine 50 years back, when he was a little bit late, a COO, and he comes in And he said, oh, I see Alzheimer already starts kicking in. During the meeting, I was like, what? So that's a really example. Okay, it is an example, but it depends, to come back to your question, it depends on the level of, okay, where are you at and why? It's the first question what comes up to me. It's why do you think it's difficult? Do you feel it's difficult? What is specifically difficult? I think I would love to deep dive into that one in a one-on-one offline somewhere else, to first listen to understand what you exactly mean, because at this moment, myself, without any context, I can't answer. There isn't a practical tip, I think, which you didn't think about already. So
yeah, I think we already mentioned it, or I mentioned it. My tip would be gather data and start talking with your employees with qualitative and quantitative surveys and interviews, because I think in those type of companies you need proof. So when you say, hey, I have this feeling, no, it's not, like, really start proving that feeling you have, and then show it to the leaders in the company, and open up about, hey, this is happening here, why is this, and then make it a topic on the agenda.
Yeah, and also try to understand what their perspective is, right? Like, why do we think it is a weakness? Why do you think it is important that people are on time? That's, then you also have like a different conversation. But I do think this is a super interesting question and super important, but I think we could dedicate a whole webinar to that as well.
I have one practical tip. Please send the Deloitte Gen Z and Millennial survey right away with a big greetings from us to the leadership team, because if you want to stay in business for the next 5 to 10, 20 years, I think that perspective when it comes to taking care of mental health and well-being for your team is of the essence of your business. So a resilient company, resilient people is resilient company. Mm-hmm. Think again.
Yeah, and we should not only look at like financial outcome of a company, but really look at the well-being of the employees of your company. And I think that shift is going already, like we're moving there. But yes, that's a big shift.
Kat, I think we have to round up, eh?
Yeah,
I think we need to wrap up. Indeed, yeah. I have a few last things that I need to announce. Well, first of all, thank you so much to the three of you. This was an incredible conversation. We'll need a follow-up sometime soon, because we're not in any way done talking about this anyway. Second of all, tomorrow 2 p.m. you're going to have in your inbox the recap, the recording of this webinar, so you can go back and sort of note down all of the things that you found valuable from the three of them. And for everyone who attended today, Michiel worked his magic, and there is 30 copies of audiobooks, well, 10 copies per book to be won. We give them out for free. One being Chief Wellbeing Officer, the other one being, please help me out, I don't have them in front of me. They are all by Stephen McGregor. The Daily Reset is one of them, and then Sustaining Executive Performance. So once you receive that in your inbox, please message me back and tell me which one you would like to receive. Hopefully you're within the lucky 10 to receive that one. And with that, we thank you so much for joining, everyone, and for all of your questions. And we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Bye.